Hi, everyone. Life Coach Carissa here. I am back with you today to talk about a new topic, and I'm really excited to talk about this topic because I know that I haven't run across it being explained in this way before. Drawing from my own experiences and the stories of moms I work with, I think it could really be super helpful in finding emotional balance and peace in your life. So, this is going to be called embracing the middle, right? And finding balance in the middle. So, I'll be explaining what that even means, how you can look for opportunities to do this in your life, and how it could bring more peace into your life. So, what I mean by middle ground is not finding yourself living in the extremes on one end or the other end of a spectrum. You can look to your right and you see what the extreme looks like in this situation, and then you can look to the left and see what that extreme looks like. And then you ultimately can be intentional and ask yourself, what would the middle look like? So, imagine life as a spectrum with extremes at either end, right? And at one end, there's rigidity and the insistence on one way of thinking or behaving. And at the other end, there's chaos and the lack of any structure or boundaries. And for a long time, I found myself floating between these extremes, whether it was in parenting, relationships, finances, like these dramatic swings from one side to the other in so many areas of my life. So I realized the importance of this when I was on my own personal development journey. And through a lot of the different areas I was intentionally working on, I kept having this common theme of I'm on one end or the other of the extremes, right? So, I want to share some indicators with you that can illustrate what it might look like for moms who are swinging from one extreme to the other. And as I read these, I would just ask you to listen with an open mind and see what resonates or may connect with you. Okay. When something connects and it catches your attention, maybe there's something there you want to look at a little closer. So, I'll ask you some questions. Do you have trouble balancing work and family? Going from overdoing it to completely pulling back? Do you feel really hard on yourself, switching between feeling not good enough and then trying to be perfect? Does your parenting swing from being too strict to too lenient without finding that more productive middle ground? Do your emotions begin to be all over the place from, um, you know, feeling more balanced to having these big outbursts? Do you find that your financial behaviors may swing between overspending and then extreme frugalness without finding that healthy balance? Do you see your relationships either as perfect or terrible, and that causes problems in getting along with others? Do you find that it's too hard to set limits, sometimes being too nice and then other times too forceful? Do you think goals can feel impossible or not even worth it, or leading you to push too hard? Do you notice that taking care of yourself might go from being ignored to being all you feel like you need to think about and focus on? And lastly, do you struggle to make decisions, shifting between impulsivity and then overthinking, or what they call analysis paralysis? So, right, you can see those extreme differences, okay? And so what did you think? Did only a few resonate with you, or did over half of them resonate and make a connection with you? Because please know that if you relate to many of them, you are not alone, because that was me. I'm still a work in progress, but I have come so far just by creating an awareness of this in my life. For instance, when it came to parenting, I used to believe that discipline had to be harsh and unwavering, and I need to teach my children the reality that the world is hard. And this rigid approach really left little room for me being able to be understanding or flexible. Now, in my situation, I can trace this back to childhood, right? I can see things now that created that sort of view and belief in me, But now, as a grown adult, I get to decide what I want this to look like as I go forward in my life, right? I can recognize my patterns and evaluate, how is this serving me in my life? And do I like it? Do I want to change it, right? In my relationships, I used to either see things as good or bad without really noticing the small differences and challenges that were in between that, right? I had this pattern of defensiveness with others. Like, I had this idea that people do things because they want something, and or they could be trying to make me look bad. I would place things and circumstances in my life in the good or bad column. I just like didn't have space for the gray. With finances, I would swing from abundance to scarcity. And what that might look like was me overspending one day and then feeling all this guilt and remorse for the purchase. So then I would go to the other extreme and think that I needed to make myself suffer and not spend a dime. And I would spread that sentiment throughout my whole family, right? To the point where I remember one of my kids didn't want to tell me about a sickness because that was going to cost money. Like, that is a prime example of swinging too far from one extreme to another, right? Because in my honest truthfulness, I would never want my children to not get a care that they, needed to have taken care of because of that, right? And so, with my self view, it was usually on the negative spectrum, right? I didn't have the ability to see that I could be a good mom and a not so good mom sometimes. I couldn't recognize that sometimes I am kind and helpful, and sometimes I'm very self absorbed. I can be both good and bad. I wasn't able to see that, right? So over time, I realized that neither extreme really brought me like that peace and fulfillment that I wanted in my life. And it was only when I started striving for that balance, that middle ground, that I really began to experience a new sense of calm and emotional stability, right? It's almost like the extremes bring you a life like this, right? Whereas when you're in the middle, you will find that those bumps are not near as severe, right? So living in the middle ground means embracing that flexibility and openness, while still having boundaries and structure. It's about finding a balance between discipline and compassion, setting boundaries without being rigid, and making mindful choices without feeling overwhelmed by extremes. So throughout my personal journey over the last 4 years, I kept just noticing that repeating pattern, that my overwhelm and stress were always coming from the result of this rigid type of thinking. And when I could create space and reflect and move to the middle, I was finding that sense of peace and calm that I wanted so badly. I also noticed that I was able to problem solve more effectively, right? When I was able to reduce that big swing. So, rigid thinking can really limit a mom's ability to adapt to different situations and solutions, making it harder for you to navigate the ups and downs of daily life. It can also lead to increased stress and difficulty in problem solving and strained relationships with children and partners. And additionally, rigid thinking can really prevent moms from exploring new ideas or perspectives, which really does hinder your personal growth and development. So, what I'd like to do now is share some ideas with you for how you can begin to do this for yourself. How can you be more aware and intentionally move to the middle ground, right? And so, I've got 7 key areas that you can focus on. One is to reflect on your beliefs. Take some time to really think about your beliefs and your attitudes on different aspects of life: parenting, relationships, finances, work, self care. Notice your patterns of thinking and if they are in the extremes, right? And consider that maybe those extremes in these beliefs, aren't helping me remain calm and not have stress in my life, right? So notice how those beliefs and patterns are creating that stress that you feel. Number two, I always preach this, and I am a big advocate for it because I know it has really transformed my own life. Practice mindfulness. Pay attention to your thoughts and your feelings and your actions in the present moment. Notice when you're leaning towards extremes, right? And try to bring yourself back to a more balanced view. Mindfulness activities that you do on a regular daily basis can really help with lowering that temperature. I meditate, I do deep breathing, I write in a journal, I pray. These things help me stay calm and focused. And one big thing I like to do for mindfulness is I ask myself a really good question, like, how else could I think about this? What would it look like if I was coming from the middle ground on this, right? When you ask your brain a good question, it will typically work to give you a good answer. Ask your brain a bad question, and it's going to give you a bad answer that's not very helpful for you. Number three, set flexible boundaries, right? Instead of strict rules, try setting boundaries that can adapt to different situations, right? What worked once for maybe a child is maybe not going to work um, a year from now for that child, right? Maybe what worked for the one child at a younger age is not going to work for the other child at a younger age. Communicate your boundaries clearly and then be open to making changes if needed, right? I didn't have a lot of room for change in my life once I had kind of said where I stand on something. And I think being willing to negotiate and compromise and maybe move more to the middle can really help maintain that harmony and joy in a home, right? And what is most important, right? Being exactly, sticking to the line that you set, or is it being flexible and having more joy in your home? Number four, embrace the gray areas. Like challenge yourself to see how complex life is and recognize that there's a lot of gray. It's not all good or bad, right? There is good and bad in the world, right? And there is also gray. So recognize that many situations have those shades of gray. And a lot of times our view of a specific thing comes from our own experiences, and we all have different experiences. So try to practice having understanding and empathy, not only towards yourself, but for others as well, right? We are not going to all see those lines exactly the same. There is gray, whether we like it or not, there is gray. Number five, seek support. Surround yourself with people who have a more balanced perspective in life, right? Connect with other moms who are also striving for that balance and share your experiences. Consider getting advice from a therapist, a coach, a mentor, someone who can offer guidance, because I think too one-sided, rigid thinking is what doesn't give us room to move, okay? Because now we have staked our claim of where we stand on this, and we're unwilling to consider anything else. And I just don't think that's a great way to be in life, right? I think we should constantly be reassessing, reevaluating, because honestly, we have a lot of beliefs from childhood that are probably not serving us today. And when you won't take a look at that, you're not going to grow and develop. So things do change, okay? And change is not always a bad thing, right? Number six, practice self compassion. I can never preach this enough. Be kind to yourself as you work towards finding that balance, right? Understand that change does take time, and it's okay to make mistakes along the way. Just be kind to yourself on that journey, right? Especially when things get really tough. I like to look at my journey with curiosity, like, wow, okay, I'm really viewing this with a lot of rigidity. I wonder where this came from in my life. How could I move to a middle ground? How would that help me? So exploring and viewing it all with love and compassion and curiosity can really open you up to a whole new way of looking at life's challenges and problems, okay? And number seven, focus on your values, right? Identify your core values. I'm not asking anyone to disregard their core values and just waffle to something else. I'm saying recognize your core values, use them to guide your decisions, but always ask yourself if your choices align with what is most important with you, right? Because in the parenting scenario, when I was so rigid in my views and my beliefs, that was creating a wall between me and my son, right? And so when I was able to step back and say, what I really want with my son is a deeper connection, a more honest, real connection, more joy, right? And when that became my focus, then I was able to see that, this doesn't necessarily have to be this way. How else could I look at this? And those abilities to be curious and be open really did start to bring in that sense of balance and fulfillment in my life, in my relationships, in really every single area. So, by incorporating those practices into your daily routine, you really can become someone who is more intentional about finding balance and creating a sense of peace and resilience in your life as a mom. It really is my hope that you will become intentional on finding areas to move to the middle ground, and you'll see the benefits from doing so. I know for me, embracing the middle ground has reduced my stress. It has enhanced my well being. It has nurtured much healthier relationships. I have more joy and peace in my home than I ever thought was possible. And I don't feel like I'm being pulled to those extremes anymore by my emotions or the circumstances. I really can navigate life with greater ease and resilience. So ask yourself what those areas are in your life. I imagine we all have similar, right? With parenting, self care, financial, work life balance. Like, I'm sure all of those probably connect with us on some level, but really think about those different areas and ask yourself, where am I very rigid? Where do I not have room for the gray? And how is that maybe not serving me and my relationships in the best way? All right, everyone, that is what I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. And, if you found this video helpful, would you do me a big favor and click that little thumbs up button? Because you can really support me in my goal to reach more moms by sharing this video with your friends or subscribing to my channel. If you know a mom who is struggling or you think she's struggling, maybe send my information her way, right? That is just one way that I try to connect with moms who are feeling stuck and miserable, and you taking those specific actions can really help me expand my reach to get to those moms that could benefit from the work that I do. And lastly, if you are curious about my work, I encourage you to visit my website at lifecoachingwithcarissa.com. I actually have available times there for complimentary coaching sessions where we can do live coaching. We can address any fears or apprehensions you may have about working with me as your one-on-one personal transformational mom coach. And really, it is so much easier than you think. You just have to take the first step of chatting with me, and then you will know if my support can lead you to greater levels of emotional peace and productivity in your life. I have so many moms that say, "Oh, it's probably too expensive. I don't have the time." Look, your brain is going to always throw up a lot of roadblocks, but I will tell you, all of this work will lead you to a transformed place that make all of these things less of an issue for you, right? Like, all of these tools and concepts you learn allow you to be more productive in your life, to create more value in your life, to move towards the things that you want in your life instead of feeling stuck with the things that you don't. So I would love to challenge that, your primitive brain's thinking that this is too hard, too much, it's not going to work for you, because I used to think that too, but then once I moved to the other side of this life I've created, I would not change it for anything, right? So just consider it. If you're on the edge and you're teetering, go find out more about me, watch my videos, go to my website, schedule a free session with me, and just see where it could take you. All right? Have a great day, everyone, and I will see you in a couple weeks.